can go ahead and do a really formal introduction for you, but why don't you just tell me about yourself? Because it's such an
Yes.
exciting journey and you've done so much.
Oh my
Let
God.
me
Thank
just
you
hear it
so
from you.
much. Yes, absolutely. So my name is Varuna Srinivasan. By pronouns are she, they. I am a physician by training. I finished my training in India. I'm from Chennai, actually. I'm Tamil. And after that, I worked with Doctors Without Borders in rural Chhattisgarh. But I've always been interested in public health. I don't know if you've ever heard of Tuller. I think sort of my first venture into the public health space and working in against child sexual abuse and assault, um, and with health education has been with Tuller um, out of Chennai, and ever since then I've sort of been wanting to work in a nonprofit space. So I finished my public health from Johns Hopkins, and I got married to a foreigner, and so I've been living here for the past 5 years. Over the last 2 years, actually, I want to say that it's up in 2.5. I've been doing more freelance work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Lovely. So, couple of things immediately that stand out for me with what you've just shared. I mean, and there's much more, and I'll invite everybody who is listening to us and is going to listen to this again to please go and check Varuna out because there's much more to her than she has said over here, but I'm not going to spend time on that anymore right now. But two
Yeah.
things stood out for me. I'm from Chhattisgarh,
Oh, wow.
and
Okay.
yeah.
Oh,
So
wow.
I lived in Bhilai and Raipur, and
Okay.
so yeah, so right
Yeah, there.
bank center Chhattisgarh and Tulir. Certainly, I've heard about Tulir because
Yeah.
Sakshi is doing prevention of child sexual abuse since last 3 decades, and
Yes.
nothing can happen without everybody moving together. It's like
Exactly.
so many birds within that net for that net to actually become
Yes. Yes.
meaningless, right? So, Varuna, I always start my sessions by inviting my guests to capture their essence in 3 words. What would those 3 words be for you today?
Extroverted, adventurous, and curious.
Wow. Extroverted, adventurous, and curious. And are these the 3 words that you would give yourself, say, 15 years ago?
Yes, I think that I always tell everyone that I'm a yes person because I have said yes to a lot of things in my life. And I think
Mm,
that, it has led me to where I am because I'm always trying to learn new things, and I've never been one to shy away. It's always a constant topic of debate with my husband because if it were up to me, I would pack all my belongings and move to New Zealand tomorrow. Um, um, so I'm very, very adventurous, and I'm very, very, I have a big spirit.
beautiful, lovely, excellent. And so, why aren't you moving to New Zealand? I mean, is he holding you back? And question for another
No,
day.
he's
What is that?
completing his training here in psychiatry. And also, we just started living together. Like, we just got married 2 years ago, but it's on the charts. It's possible that, in a couple of years, we might actually end up moving to New Zealand.
Yeah, lovely, lovely idea, lovely place.
Anything is possible.
That thought
Yeah.
has crossed so many minds, including ours, that okay, if there's one place we'd like to go and stay in, that's New Zealand, and for so many other reasons. So I wanted to ask you about your experience of working with Doctors Without Borders because I'm really fascinated with everybody who goes and spends time there.
Um, yeah, so I think that, the unadulterated version is that there are a lot of organizations, from abroad that come to India and like want to help and sort of want to establish their international base. I think that, very rarely do they want to work with the government or any other associated organization. And I think that, that's one thing that I did notice with them was that they were not able to collaborate. They were not able to, um, sort of find a middle ground of how to coexist with the government over there. And I think the second thing is that, but overall, I think that, the journey really helped establish sort of the public health sense that, there's something that we can really do to help people around us, and that there are people who don't have access to healthcare, and people who really do need basic health education. I was talking to many women about contraception and what contraception can look like, helping them assert their own reproductive um, boundaries. I think that, oftentimes women are viewed as baby making machines, or there's no sort of ideology around sexual freedom or sexuality. It's sort of, you know, giving birth and then that's it. And then the women sort of take care of the children. And I think there's sort of a feminist awakening in terms of like how we can help change systems to benefit all women.
It's not easy to talk about contraceptives here, right?
Yeah.
So were you able to have open discussions about that? Because that brings in about, choice, it brings about conversations on pleasure. There's a lot of politics around this, right? I mean, and pleasure politics in India is kind of really, we don't believe sex is meant for pleasure, do we?
No, absolutely agree with you. You're right. I think contraception, the only reason that people wanted to talk about contraception was birth spacing, which is where you use so after your pregnancy, you use a contraception because there's the idea that men are going to want to have sex and can't really control themselves. And so we often tell women, like, you can't have a baby within the next year, right? You just gave birth. And it's sort of almost this reaction from them where it's like, oh, it's not in my control. The people around me want me to have another baby, I can't really, my husband gets to decide that. And so then it becomes sort of this discussion that it's like, it would be hard on the person's body to have a second child within, 6 to 8, 9 months of giving birth to their first child, right? And so I think contraception at that point wasn't really about pleasure, right? Like, oh, let's use contraception so that we can exercise pleasure. It's more about like, oh, it's birth spacing. Use this contraception so you can continue to have sex and not have another baby.
Did you ever get round to pleasure?
Never ever talking about it, and I don't think that was sort of the idea was survival, right? It was just like, how can I have a safe pregnancy so that I don't die? How can I have contraception so that I don't put pressure on my body and strain my body when I'm trying to have a second child? Or do I tell my husband I don't want to have a second child? How can I get sterilized so that I don't have more, because it looks like I'm going to continue to get pregnant at the rate at which we're going. And sort of like convincing men to use condoms. And so the idea of pleasure never, ever came up.
Yeah, it's really a conversation we must explore in depth at times, because just this one thing like a contraceptive can be used for the absence of it, or the lack of use is really about abuse, isn't it? It is about sexual abuse. It is about controlling a woman's body. It's about domestic violence.
Yes.
It's about forcing her to go and have an abortion, conceive and have an abortion. So there's just so much with this one little thing that we're talking about, which is the use of contraceptive. It is about choice. It is about responsibility. There's just so much inherent in it, isn't it?
I always like to use the word coercion, because I feel like not many of us accept that we're all survivors of sexual assault, because, even in sort of a modern context, being a city girl, I think that I have had my fair share of coercion, where the partner is like, I don't want to use a condom, or this stealthing, which is the practice of saying that you use a condom, but secretly taking it off before engaging in sexual activity, convincing persons to not be on birth control, messing with their birth control, so society shaming women for opting for the choice of birth control, I think there are many ways of looking at this. It's not, exactly black and white. I think in India, people only associate, rape and the act of raping with sexual assault. But I think that sexual coercion is a form of sexual assault. And,
Absolutely.
not having a healthy conversation about birth control and coercing your partner to have sex without birth control is also a form of sexual violence.
Absolutely. So well said, Varuna. Thank you so much. And and we don't talk enough about it. We don't connect these dots enough. We kind of just want to ignore and gloss over these things. And if I throw consent in this whole package,
Yeah,
how does it
absolutely.
change? Just talk a little more about that. I'm sure you have conversations on consent,
Oh,
even in a yeah. Come on, yes.
yeah, I did a post on my page, which I don't know if it's still up. But marital rape is still sort of, it's this gray area in our country, right? Where in India and many other South Asian places, it's this idea that your husband, because I'm talking, in a heteronormative gender binary sense, right? In a system that has a very strict gender binary and heteronormativity, that the
Mm-hmm.
husband has a right over the wife, that he has the right to demand sex anytime he wants. I don't know if anyone has seen Lipstick Under My Barka. I really, really recommend that you see that movie. Like Konkana Sen, I think it's Konkana Sen, who, who is with her husband, and her husband is constantly telling her not to work and impregnating her, and she has to get multiple abortions because she doesn't want to have a baby. And she's not able to say no to him. And sort of this topic of marital rape comes up, where the society says that, it's your husband. You should always, give in to their needs. And sort of this idea of consent gets blurred almost, right? Like, so, how do you assert control in a society that tells you that your body belongs to them, right? So from a young age, we are giving up consent, in people telling us how to dress. We don't really have consent over anything, right? We are often told that we are to blame for anything that happens to us. um, you know, uh, and it sort of becomes this really big um, topic of discussion, right? So I think that it comes down to, go give your uncle a hug. Go give, go to our uncle, go sit on uncle's lap, come give your dad a kiss. It sort of starts at a young age where children are not allowed to exert or assert their own sort of boundaries. And I think that goes into adulthood, right? Where you're with a boyfriend or with a partner, and they sort of like make a move on you, and you feel uncomfortable, but you want to go with it because you don't want to look, uncool, right? You don't want to be the one who stopped the sexual moment or ruined the sexual moment. And sort of it becomes a pattern. Um, yeah. And not that people are to blame. I think it's sort of the society that shapes, and our environment that shapes our understanding of consent.
Absolutely, and that's where it really begins, right? We start losing our sense of personal autonomy, boundaries are blurred, and then we're managing it through our life. And that really brings us to the question that Sampathan has over here, whether our home is safe for our children. And like we all know, and what Varuna is also reiterating, is that no, it's not necessarily that home is a safe space. What do you have to say about that, Varuna?
Yeah, and I think these statistics as well. Like, for many children who are sexually assaulted or abused, that, it's usually someone who is known to them, right? And I think that most cases of even violence in adults is usually as a result of being stuck in that generational trauma, right? Like people who have been hurt other people, right? You grow up in a surrounding where you see your mom being abused by your dad. You don't sort of understand the boundaries of consent. You don't understand body autonomy, or you were abused as a child. And so, we've seen that constantly with, serial rapists or people who are violent offenders. And I think that, it is sad that most of, the children who have been abused usually say that it was someone who was close to them or someone who they trusted. So in most cases, unfortunately, it is not a safe place for kids.
That's true, absolutely. And that brings me to when we talk about safe. What is a safe space, Varuna? How would you identify a safe space? And what is a safe space for you? I mean, this is a question that we ask continuously all the time to ourselves and everybody around us, because if you're able to add, and okay, I'll speak after you give me your thing because I can go on about it.
No, please do go on about it, because I definitely want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, no, for me, because very often safe space has been identified as a physical location or a structure, and the idea is to be able to look at it not just as a physical space but a relationship or a an emotional space or a psychological space, and then it has all its markers where I don't really need to be able to explain myself, where my back, somebody's watching my back for me, and I'm not continuously on my guard, I'm not being judged. I don't have to perform either my trauma or my power or my strength
Yeah.
or my weakness. I can be beyond all of that and just relax and just be. And that space for me is really important. And I'm continuously looking around me in my everyday life to say, this is a safe space for me. Or am I feeling threatened over here? And what is threatening me? So, and that is, I think the ability to be able to recognize the threat
Yeah.
and be able to draw your boundary from around it is what is really needed in everyday life for it to then extend to my sexual spaces and my sexual identity as well. Because that is where I get compromised very quickly if I don't know how to practice it in other places.
100%. It's really sad because I was born, I was, I am from India, like I am Indian, but for me personally, India is not a safe space, and that's why I left. I was continuously sexually harassed, and sort of, I love the idea where you said constantly having to watch your back, right? Because even when I was wearing, short clothes and going out in public and going to bars, I think there were constant vigilantes, uncles and aunties telling my dad that I'm this kind of girl and that I'm, drinking alcohol, even though I'm above the legal age, and, sort of engaging in peer-based activities. And, sort of being shamed for that constantly. So there's sort of the emotional duress that it was never, first of all, like physically, that, it wasn't a safe space because there were men who stalk you and ogle you, and not just like in real life, but cyber stalk you and cyber bully you. But also to know that, society as a whole was sort of hell bent on telling me how I should behave and what I should do. And I'm not really looking out for me, like you said, or not having my back. So it wasn't really like the community was coming together to protect me. It was more like I was being shamed for not making certain choices. And so, that was one of the main reasons that I really wanted to seek out, another environment and create an environment for me. Because I think it's also like, I think a safe environment for me is one where, I'm able to grow intellectually, and I'm able to have conversations about what our futures and our future spaces can look like and community should look like. And I also think about how I want my child to grow up, because, I love my parents and they have a lot of generational trauma. And so they raised me how they were raised, right? And how they were raised isn't necessarily how I should have been raised.
Yes.
And so, I think that when I think about my child, it's about, like allowing them to assert their physical boundaries, creating an environment where, I could never tell my parents if I was having sex or if I like accidentally got pregnant. So I often put myself in situations like, you should be the person that your child runs to when there's trouble, right? And that should be a space that is inviting. Like, you shouldn't dread a phone call that your child says, I'm in trouble or I'm pregnant, or mom, like I did something bad, or I think I'm pregnant, right? So that should be a problem that you're solving together. You shouldn't be working against your child. And so I try to imagine those situations and sort of work out with those situations. And I tell my husband too, right? Because he is a very important person in my life. And I say that I shouldn't be afraid. I should always know that you have my back and that I can come to you. And so I think it's constantly, evolving for everybody. But just, you don't want to be the person that is making it difficult for other people, right? You want to always be the
Absolutely.
kind of person that other people can come to, and, talk about things that are bothering them, and, sort of approach that in a non-judgmental way.
I loved what you said just now, Varuna, when you said it's a continuous process, because
It
really it
is.
is. It's something that you have to work on a regular, ongoing basis. You can't say, "Oh, okay, I've done this, and this, and now everything is set, and this is a safe relationship, or this is a safe interaction, or this, it is something that one has to constantly be negotiating, sharing, because it's human behavior, it's
Yes.
human dynamics, and there are so many forces from the environment which are shaping us, right? I mean,
Yes,
yeah, I love what you said about that. It's really a continuous place. Safe space is a continuous process. Building a
it
safe
is.
space is a continuous process. Really nice.
It
So,
really
how do you
is.
bring this together? How do you bring this together in your work? All the work that you do on sex education, with women and children. However, how does this come together for you?
I think, there was something that I read the other day, which is like, instead of like, what emotion do you want to evoke in people when they see you,
Mm-hmm.
or when they read your work? And I think that's something that I carry with me very deeply, which is, like for some people it's humor, for some people it's sort of, like it's beauty, or it's like healing. And I think for me it's definitely healing and community and creating those safe spaces, right? Because continually in every, whoever I talk to, I always say that, it's nothing personal to my parents or to sort of the society I grew up in, but I personally didn't have those safe spaces to explore my sexuality. I didn't have communities that I could seek out and feel seen and heard and validated and reassured, right? And so I had to build those from the ground up. And sometimes that's exhausting. And so what I really want, when I share my own experiences, or when I talk about sexuality, everyone's like, how do I know if I'm bisexual, or like, like I think I'm bisexual. And I think what I try to offer them is like, your identity is constantly evolving. And I think what I really want to do for you is for you to create spaces within yourself that are safe for you to return to, right? So instead of shaming yourself and feeling bad, and guilt tripping yourself or telling you that you shouldn't be something, it's like, why not? Let me sit with this discomfort. Let me explore this feeling. Let me challenge these feelings. And so that's kind of what I want to do. And so nothing is black and white with me. I really like to think of it as a spectrum. That's why I have a lot of bright colors on my page, to sort of evoke those feelings, that, nothing is set in stone, that it really is. It's a circle. Your personality should be a circle. It's never like a straight line. And you can come back to the same
Lovely.
point. You can move away from that point. And so I really like to think of it like that.
Lovely, lovely, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I love what you're saying about this, about healing and about that being a circle. And lovely, what you're saying is about having a safe space within yourself to come back to, and that is the most difficult thing to do, isn't it? To sit with your discomfort, because the minute I feel uncomfortable, all I want to do is
Yes.
to erase it, distract me, myself, move on, do
Yes.
something else. But just to
Yeah.
sit with the discomfort and actually have the
Right.
courage to
Yeah.
look through it, that's important. So do you kind of
Yeah.
teach them the skill to do it? Like, how do you take them there? I'm very curious.
I think it's more of like a sharing of a personal experience, because even as a victim of like sexual assault myself, I think that for a long time I was doing things that weren't necessarily safe. I was seeking external safe spaces. I was seeking this validation from outside. And I think that, to tell people and be vulnerable, I think is already breaking. I try to like break that barrier that, oh, I went through this course which offered 12 steps, but it's actually messy. It's so messy. And I try to show that. I try to tell people that I used alcohol and drugs to cope with my sexual assault. I started going to therapy and I was diagnosed with PTSD. And people are like, oh, but Indians don't have mental illness. It's all in your head. And it's like, no, there are days that I get depression and that I feel triggered, like I still can't wear tight tops. And like sort of sharing those experiences and saying you're not alone, and we can talk about this. And I'm not giving you this perfectly curated message, that I was a survivor, and no, I am a survivor. This is my past, my present, and my future. um, and sort of really sending out those messages instead of trying to fix somebody, because nobody can be fixed. You only have to evolve into whoever you want to be. And so sort of sharing that vulnerability and creating spaces where people can share that vulnerability with me, I think is more important.
You also mentioned how exhausting it was for you to talk about your sexuality, and do
Yeah.
you think that's something that has become like something which was maybe a perceived weakness has actually ended up becoming a strength for you? Would you kind of talk about that?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think that, people are constantly telling women how to behave and women and non-binary folks how to behave and like, oh, you shouldn't talk about your periods too much. Oh, you shouldn't talk about why do you keep talking about being bisexual? And it's like, well, because no one was talking about being bisexual when I grew up, right? And so like I never had those spaces. So you're right. I think that, oftentimes I do guilt trip myself, and I think there are people who like try to feed into that negativity, right? And tell me that I'm doing too much. But I think that in the end, like, you're right. It was exhausting initially. And it was like, I don't want to talk about this. I don't know. I'm grieving that I'm grieving that I never had that space as a child to explore my sexuality. I'm grieving that I never got to kiss a girl out in the open. I'm grieving that I, never got to attend Pride with my parents. But I think you're right. I'm converting that into a strength right now where, I'm sort of trying to spread those messages and talk about it more openly. So you're right. Like, I think that it gives me strength now to constantly talk about these experiences.
Um, so, have you discovered the comfort of talking about these experiences in your close and intimate circles as well, places which were closed earlier? I mean, have you managed to bridge that gap?
Yeah, so I did come out to my brother, and I came out to my husband, and I think my parents read about it in like the Vogue interview that I did, where they said like, "Oh, well, she's bisexual, but as long as she's married, it's fine. She can be bisexual." Sort of, and I think that this is something that I also talk about, which is the cultural cost of coming out. Is like, just sometimes you may never have those spaces, and you just have to grieve, and you just have to accept it. Like, like I think that I may never be able to come out in the big Western way, right? That people like record the way they come out to their parents, and sort of like explore that. I don't think that I can ever have that experience. But I think that, I am talking, I'm no longer afraid of talking about it on public platforms, I think is what, and having it come back to my parents is because I found that safe space where I'm no longer scared for my safety. I'm financially and emotionally independent. So, I think the people in my life who need to know do know.
Brilliant, brilliant. There's a question here, Varuna, which is saying,
Yeah.
do you think solidarity with other women is an important aspect of self-healing?
Yeah, I mean, it also depends on the type of community, right? Because, sometimes we don't agree with everybody. It's important to find people that we do agree with, and sort of defining what solidarity means to you. I also can't see any of the questions, so thank you for reading them out. I think it's like I can't see any of them.
That's all right. I have another question here, which is, I don't know if you would be able to answer it in this forum, which is talking about why evidence is important in cases of child sexual abuse. Sampath, I don't know, Varuna, if you want to take this question, but
you should. I think you might be better equipped to answer this, and I want to learn from you too.
No, so Sampath, I would want to open this conversation with you on a DM as well, because this is a longer conversation and it's got to do with the law, and it's not really about just child sexual abuse. It's about the kind of processes we have in place for sexual assault.
Right.
And there are some legal statutes which are there, which is how the law has been defined, and the laws, most of the laws are framed from a very, very patriarchal mindset, and that's a longer discussion if you want to analyze why the law is like that. But what all legalities are important over there, which have been instituted there within the framework for evidence, is a question that you can DM me, and I will certainly respond to that in depth. Thank you for asking that question. Yes.
Yeah, very insightful.
So today I had this conversation with this group of young students from about 6 or 7 cities, and they were all talking about cyberbullying. And so do you want to open that up about social media being a safe and effective space for discussion about sexual issues and sex education, or the kind of things that we're talking about right now, without us getting, branded or trolled or, so do you want to take that a little bit?
Yeah, no, I think that, there are a lot of people, there are fat influencers, there are trans influencers. My brother is often like, why do you share hateful DMs. Like, why do you share DMs? Like, why do you expose them? Like, just ignore them. But I think what's so important is to share that there are still like these negative side effects, like because everyone sort of like looks up to these people and put we have our vulnerabilities too. And I really appreciate it when other influencers in this space and educators share the hateful DMs they get, because this is an unfortunately evil side of social media, because it can get to you. There are other influencers that friends of mine who have been bullied to a point where they self-harm and they feel suicidal, and suicidal ideation. So it's sort of the toxic side of it. Unfortunately, these spaces are disrupted in a way. But I think that, sometimes I'm like, social media isn't a safe space for me. Like recently, I was like, this isn't a safe space for me. I might delete social media because I can't really deal with all of this negativity and this idea. But, what I think is really important is that, to find your pocket of people that constantly remind you why it's so important to do this work. That, you do get this DM from a kid who is like, thank you for sharing your experiences. I've decided not to come out to my parents and to move out and, see, how things can go for me. And, it really is like, it's hard, but you have to look for the good in all of it. And also just really depend on like a group of people. Like I have a group of like Indian sexual health educators that I really depend on, for my emotional strength. Because I feel like they are a safe place for me. Like I can go there and rant, and I can go and complain, or I can say, can you report this person? And so like, if you are engaging on social media work, is to really just find those groups of people that can have your back, like you said.
So important. So what I'm really hearing you say, Varuna, is that there is no getting away from those who will actually troll you, but as long as you keep a focus on why we're doing the work we're doing and how it is benefiting at least some people, we kind of keep the focus on there. But it's also important to recognize that I myself am getting impacted with it, and I do really need to take care of my boundaries, and so have a support group where I can go and vent and get nurtured in return, right? So that's, I think, going to be very useful for the students who were going on asking, but what do we do? What do we do? And unfortunately, we didn't have so much time to go into it. And I hope that they get to see this live and hear you right now.
Yeah. And I, would love to continue to have conversations like this with you, because I think that you are so insightful, and these are the right kind of questions that I often, I think it's buried in the back of my mind, but I think this conversation has, sort of made me rethink all of this. So yeah, thank you as well. This is awesome.
Varuna, there's another question here for you, and I think if you can, it's saying what to do when mom withhold families from patriarchy thinking and all, and in this case, how to grow up.
Yeah, so this is a really important, like, I think that everyone's like education, but I think what it's really about is breaking that intergenerational trauma. And I think that, sometimes you can't heal your parents, you can only heal yourself. So as long as you have those ideologies and you, sort of want to break that cycle of toxicity, and you say that I don't want to share these values with my children. Like, I don't think these values were beneficial for me growing up, and I disagree with them. I don't think that women are inferior to men. I think that LGBTQIA plus people deserve to live openly and freely and have a great life. And I don't want to do that with my children. And so they'll just really, unfortunately, you can't change their thinking. I think it just has to be a grieving process where you just accept it and sort of working on creating your own space away from that. You know what I mean? So I like having a little pocket in your life where you can retreat to and have where you can build on that. And so when it's easier for you to leave home, that's a space that you can go towards.
Thank you so much, Varuna. And I think that would actually also answer your question, Sampathan, when he's asking what we can do if our parents are not supporting you in a case of child sexual abuse, because it is difficult for them to
It is very
actually
difficult.
accept that in their watch their child was sexually abused, and they get to
Yes.
know about it years later when you're an adult.
Yes.
It was very difficult for my parents to accept that I was a survivor of child sexual abuse, and
Oh,
it
I'm
took
sorry.
lots
Yeah.
and lots and lots of conversations and many years of discussion for them to even come to terms with something like that has happened within. So don't get disheartened if your parents are not
Yeah.
supporting in cases of child sexual abuse. It is a long journey, and I think if
Yes.
you're having that journey, it's a very brave journey.
It is. Absolutely second all of that.
Thanks, Varuna. Varuna, I mean, I can go on asking you so many questions, but I just want to ask you, as we're tapering off over here, is there any advice that if you were to look like hindsight, and I'm saying it and I'm personalizing it for you, but it's really meant for all our young friends over here.
Yeah.
If you were to look back to the young Varuna that was there many years ago, what will you tell her? What advice will you give her? What will you tell her that, hold on, I don't know. What will you tell her?
I will tell her to be more kind to herself because, there are many moments where the grief and everything that we're facing makes us want to turn against ourselves and hate ourselves and sort of work to destroy ourselves. But you to really focus on cultivating that safe space within yourself, having a space where you can retreat, right? If you find that you are engaging in negative coping habits, in self-destructive habits, where you constantly are looking for ways to convince yourself that something is wrong with you, then it might be time to sort of reassess what you're feeling and seek some help. And that's not always easy to do. But to really just be kind with yourself and say that, whatever this is I'm going through is just a phase, and hopefully I'll be able to find my way back home. And that home is not something that you can construct externally, but more something that you have to look towards internally.
Beautiful, lovely. I can almost see the young Varuna saying, "Yeah, I think if I hear
Yes.
that, I can hold on. I mean, I can carry on."
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a
Beautiful,
big fan
lovely.
of reparenting. I think that, especially for children who've often lost out on their youth, and I think, even for children who are survivors of sexual abuse, sort of as adults, one thing that we can have control over is reparenting and reimagining what it would have looked like if we had grown up in a safe space, as a child in a safe space.
Absolutely,
So I
absolutely.
would also say that.
Lovely. And I must read out some comments over here since you can't read them. I said somebody saying here,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you so much, both of you. Thank you very much for your openness and your beautiful insights, Varuna. Thank you so much again, and thank you for this conversation. And it goes on. So I'm just sharing that with you, but I want to do
Thank you.
change the mood a little bit and just do not really a rapid fire, but hopefully a rapid fire kind of a
Okay.
thing, if then it's supposed. So let's just go for it. Let's hear your favorite movie.
Oh God, I was going to say my best friend's wedding, but I don't know why that came to
No,
mind.
please say that because it's
Actually,
mine
no,
too.
it's
I love
Legally
it.
Blonde. I changed my mind. It's Legally Blonde. There we go. Okay.
Okay. I'll stay with my best friend's wedding. Okay, your favorite song.
Oh God. Okay, right now it's I Need You to Stay by Kid Laroi and Justin Bieber.
Yeah. Food you would die for. Food you would die for.
Rajma chawal and a nice papad and pickle. Any
Were we
day.
like
Like that would be my last meal.
were we sisters from another life or something?
Oh my God. If we ever meet up in Delhi, we should go for some Rajma chawal. I would die for it.
Absolutely. Okay, dream destination.
Japan.
Ah, really? Okay. Book you're reading?
Currently, I'm reading a book called 100 Years Between Margot and Lenny. It's about a girl who's dying and she has terminal cancer and how she finds um, sort of what life is all about in a hospital in UK. It's great. It's awesome. It's fiction.
Lovely, lovely. Rains make you feel?
Sorry?
Rains make you feel?
You mean like a rain, like raining?
Like raining, if it's raining, how does it make you feel?
It makes me feel
How do you
cozy.
respond? All right. Um, we've talked about this extensively, but I still want you to give me three words you would associate with the word safe.
Loving, kind, and compassionate.
Nice. Lovely. Beautiful. Sexually, you are.
Satisfied?
Lovely. Equality for you is.
Is for everyone.
Mm. And your parting words.
Be kind to yourself and be kind to everybody. I think, love endlessly. And, the grass is not always greener on the other side.
So true. So true. Thanks so much, Varuna. This was so delightful. And please do share some pictures of you in those lovely saris and those lovely heels, especially.
I am very excited. It's actually the city where my husband and we met and we fell in love in the city. So it really means something to me, but I will most definitely do that. Thank you again so much for hosting me. This was incredible.
Thank you, Varuna. I'm just going to do a formal ending for this because it's going to go onto
Yes.
other platforms as well at some point. So
Yes.
bear with me while I now read something formally. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
For 3 decades, Sakshi has been working for the prevention of gender-based violence. We could not have done this on our own. We cannot do this on our own. To continue our work, we need your participation, all of us,
Yes.
in this together. The Rakshan Project by Sakshi, under the direction of the Ministry of Youth Affairs, is working with NSS units all across the country to equip 4 million youth to become preventers of child sexual abuse. It is time we nip the problem in its bud. Help us. Help us in working to skill build Rakshans who can prevent sexual violence in their community. 1,000 rupees makes one home a safe space. It supports the capacity building of one young adult, a preventer of harm, a Rakshan within the family to make that home a safe space, free of child sexual abuse, and interrupt the cycle of sexual violence. Join us in building this social tipping point. I look forward to seeing you all for the next live. Thank you so much, Varuna, for being here with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I look forward to working with you all again.